For when I need to disappear and still win. They thought they had rewritten your history. What they didn't know was you had rewritten theirs first. The servers buckled. The live feeds shut down. A failsafe launched across their private comm system. Full network redacted. It was meant to wipe all project branches in event of a hostile intrusion. But you'd rewritten that too. Now, instead of deletion, it opened everything. Meeting transcripts, internal voice logs. One-click auto-forward rules to global agencies. All preset to trigger if one variable changed. Motef 7 authenticated. You authenticated from a laptop in the hospital cafeteria, while she lay unconscious 3 floors above you. The nurses thought you were just another father waiting on death, but your hands were remapping the end of an empire. The signal came through again, short. A pulse from a known node in Morocco. A message buried under an image. The photo was her, younger, smiling, in your arms. You didn't remember the moment, but the metadata placed it 3 days before her exposure. The message below it read, "She was leverage. Varel made the call. Not all of us agreed." A name followed. One of the old operatives, dead now, but still playing both sides from the grave. You closed the laptop. The Interstat team was now in control of the boardroom. Varel had gone silent. His phone was on airplane mode, his secure line unplugged, and on his desk sat a single manila folder labeled Motif 7 if returned. He opened it with shaking fingers. Inside, a Polaroid. Her back, the marks. A note beneath it. You left her like you left me. This time, I write the ending. And you would. You knew the moment the champagne cork flew and the lights dimmed. They thought it was over. They thought they had danced on your grave long enough to stop watching the exits. But you were always there, dressed in silence, threaded into their celebration with glass optics and embedded sound. The penthouse suite was soundproofed, but not silent. You designed the room 12 years ago for meetings that required absolute, plausible deniability, billion-dollar briefings, asset terminations, pre-IPO power shifts. The mirrored ceiling wasn't aesthetic. It was surveillance-grade one-way laminate, and the chandelier, it had a mic in every crystal. They thought you were ash, that your final file corrupted in the Zurich blast was the last echo of your name. But the room that toasted your sacrifice was the same one you used to record the first Sable trial negotiation. Same circuit, same frequency. You built it to listen long after you were gone. The toast came 41 minutes into the footage. Varel raised his glass with that slow, confident curl you used to admire when you still believed in loyalty. Around him, CCOs, legal heads, shadow partners from non-extradition havens. And one man, silent, no badge, nodded as Varel said the words that burned into your encrypted overlay. "We took the ghost's fire and sold it as light. They thought you'd never hear it. But your ghost ID was coded into the room's firmware, hidden beneath the false client layer you left after Madrid. The audio pinged your archive the moment the toast began. The drive had been building it, for years, slowly, without rush, without error. Every betrayal, every contract adjusted in your name posthumously, every moment they cashed your legacy like a casino chip. The signal came through on the anniversary of your death, as if it knew. As if the machine remembered you better than your friends did. You watched the footage twice, alone in the cold storage vault beneath the hospital where your daughter's last transfusion dripped in time with the hum of your vengeance. The audio was clear. No static. No doubt. Just a man you once trusted selling your life for equity and control. And still, You didn't release it. Because exposure wasn't revenge. Exposure was architecture. You needed the storm to rise at the right moment, to collapse every room they thought was sealed. So you waited. And while you waited, you seeded the feeds. The party was 2 years ago. But the timestamp remained intact. You pushed it, edited nothing, into a private drive marked for press release. Not tabloids. Not social media. The Hague, Interpol. 2 rival firms you once held shares in under alias. The story would explode not because it was shocking, but because it was timed. You arranged for the transfer the moment the audit clock struck 0. They thought their champagne was privacy. They didn't realize the entire floor had been duplicated. That the party they remembered was a ghost you wore like armor. The surveillance wasn't just in the ceiling. One of the guests, Delaney, head of biotech R&D, had been working for you the whole time. You didn't have to blackmail her. She was Grace's godmother. The moment she found out about the back exposure protocols, about the children used as test hosts, she turned. Silently. Completely. You gave her access. She gave you blood trail. After blood trail. The night of the party, she wore a pin on her lapel. Old gold from your first startup. A pin with a lens. Every whisper was hers. Every lie, yours. You paired the audio with the footage. Perfect sync, no edits, no cuts. Just corporate self-destruction on tape. Delaney died 6 weeks after the party. Car crash, clean. You knew better. Varl's thumbprint was still on the authorization order for Containment Class D. He used your phrasing like he forgot who invented it. The footage of the toast wasn't the climax, it was the lockpick. You paired it with offshore invoices, blood contracts, and deployment logs from the facility in Cameroon, where the variant that marked your daughter's back was first used in field tests, where 6 children died in isolation, where Grace's DNA was matched by proxy against a synthetic carrier as part of a false control group. You found the false death reports. You overlaid her medical scans. You showed the world how their ghost's daughter became the evidence they couldn't explain. You timed the leak for the night of the global strategy call. All division heads present, Varl presiding, and then you hit play. The projector in their conference room had always been secure, shielded, invisible to outside signal. But you weren't outside. You were inside. Still embedded. A ghost in the system that built itself around you. And Delaney left you the keys. The screen lit up mid-call. The toast. The voices. The names. No one touched their phones. No one spoke. Some looked for the cameras. Some knew they were already framed. Varel didn't move, because he recognized the angle. He looked up, and for a second his eyes locked with the ceiling. Not the lights, not the image, but the mirrored truth above him. And you knew he knew. They thought they'd burned every bridge, but you were always the water beneath them, waiting to rise. As the clip ended, the room froze. Legal counsel stood. One board member vomited. Someone screamed in French. And Varel finally reached for the envelope marked MOTIF 7, Contingency. But the envelope was empty, just one note in your handwriting. You recorded your betrayal. You never told anyone what Project Latchkey truly cost. Not when they pulled the funding, not when the prototype disappeared, and not when the company claimed it never existed. You buried it all in a cold archive under your home server. Encrypted, renamed, erased from official memory. Because you knew how many hands were already dirty. They thought you stayed quiet because you'd been broken. They thought your daughter's illness would keep you distracted and soft, unaware of what they'd built atop. The bones of your design, But when she whispered through cracked lips and asked you to help her sit up, you saw something on her back that made the past scream back to life. A faint burn, symmetrical, branded low across her shoulder blades. You traced the line with your hand and felt the room spin, because you recognized the pattern from the original prototype's biometric lock. You'd designed it as a signature, something elegant and invisible, meant only for synthetic testing, not for a human child. Your daughter had never been part of their trials, but she'd visited the facility once with her school 5 years ago, and came home with a mild fever that never truly faded. They said it was a virus, said it would pass. But you knew that wasn't the truth then, and the shapes seared into her back told you it never passed at all. You knew that someone had restarted Latchkey without you, and you knew that she had been their test subject. They thought you were too far removed, too disgraced to ever connect the timeline, or care enough to lift the sheet. The moment you saw it, your body moved before your mind. You called the police, said nothing, and left the room while they arrived in silence. But you didn't tell them everything. You still needed proof, and your silence was the one weapon they never saw coming. The hospital cameras blinked once, then went dark. A nurse you'd never seen before slipped out the back door and was never seen again. And the file from her last scan vanished from the system as if it had never existed. You went home, opened the cold server, and reactivated the dormant directory titled Failsafe Echo. It flickered on like a match in a cave. Dry files, wiped schematics, surveillance audio stitched back together byte by byte. And there it was, the branding schematic, the one you built, repurposed without consent, scaled for human compatibility. They had broken every rule of bioethics. They'd done it quietly, tied it to offshore patents and subcontractor shells, tracing back to the board's own research expansion in Jakarta. And they'd used your legacy to cover their crimes, your silence, your grief, in your name. You found the old keycard beneath your daughter's baby teeth in the cedar box she loved. She must have known, must have seen something. Or maybe she just wanted you to finish what they started with her skin. They thought they had erased every trail. But the archived access logs, once decrypted, showed a familiar name entering the Jakarta site the night your daughter first fell ill. Your former partner, your best friend, the one who toasted your dismissal over steak and champagne. You knew then that the betrayal wasn't abstract. It wasn't corporate. It was personal, brutal, and deliberate. They'd watched you fall, used your absence to test a technology not yet safe, and sacrificed your family for a quarterly gain. You stared at the code that used to be yours, except now it had been modified, weaponized, to track neural patterns, paired with biometric feedback loops, and disguised as pediatric therapy. Her hospital records read like test logs, and she was never supposed to survive past the 3rd phase. The signal came through just after midnight, not through a secure channel, but from an old burner line, tied to an extinct ID you used in the field. It pulsed once, opened a secure live feed, and showed the Jakarta lab, empty, abandoned, and covered in dust, except for the single flickering light above the test chair. There was blood on the floor, the kind that had been scrubbed, rescrubbed, and still seeped back through the tiles like it remembered. And in the corner, the name of your daughter was etched faintly into a surgical tray, next to the code signature they once said never existed. You leaned back in your chair and felt your hands stop shaking. The files were intact, time-stamped, backed up twice on private cloud mirrors you'd set up long ago, You knew now what needed to happen, and who needed to fall. They thought you'd go to the press, but that would be too fast, too loud, and too easy to discredit. No, you would wait. Until the audit. Until the quarterly review that mandated all executive systems be unlocked and live monitored. Until every boardroom screen was synchronized, every statement reviewed, and every financial layer peeled back like skin from bone. That's when the names would surface, the login IDs, the offshore payments, the test records hidden beneath consulting invoices. You closed the laptop and turned off the lights. Your daughter was asleep now, breathing slow, shallow, still alive. But the burn on her back pulsed red beneath the gauze like a countdown had already begun. You wore the same gray suit they remembered from your exit interview. It hung looser now, but it still held the scent of boardroom war, charcoal, ambition, the antiseptic of betrayal. They watched you enter like a ghost they hadn't prepared for, too caught up in quarterly wins to notice the ledger bleeding under their feet. You nodded once at the receptionist. New face, same script. The lobby screens played recycled propaganda about human-centric innovation, while the elevators whispered up with an almost religious hum. Your ID badge still worked, but only because you'd mirrored its last viable echo into the system weeks ago, buried behind payroll redundancies. They thought security was an algorithm, but it had always been a memory of who knew what and when they chose to wake it. You waited until the glass swallowed you into silence, then tapped your palm against the concealed strip of the wall, triggering the backdoor overlay. The signal came through again, stronger this time. It tunneled from the Jakarta mainframe, relayed off 3 mirrored proxies in Kyoto, and ended inside your daughter's biometric chart at County West. They were still tracking her vitals, still running simulations through her pain, converting pulses into profit. You stepped into the executive floor as the quarterly audit began. The lights flickered, not from power issues, but from the scheduler override you installed at 3:33 a.m. That morning. Every presentation, every slide deck, every prepared lie stuttered mid-frame, and then rewrote itself in real time. They stared, blinking, as names started appearing. Not just aliases, but full legal entities, passport logs, shipping routes, and IP traces. All of it sourced from the core of their secured infrastructure, because you had written it once. You knew they'd panic by minute 4. That's when your ex-partner, Jarrell, would start sweating under his collar and tap twice on his tablet, a code for legal to scrub the feed. But the scrub script had been rerouted hours ago, replaced with a live loop you fed into the press via ghost shell servers. They thought you wouldn't come for them. They thought a man who buried his daughter in sterile rooms had already lost the will to burn things down. But they didn't know the cost of watching someone suffer from a wound no doctor could explain, inflicted not by chance, but by the hands of men who once called you brother. Jarrell stood slowly, voice calm, spinning words about sabotage and cybercrime. The others nodded, clung to the illusion. But the boardroom lights flickered again, this time turning red as your daughter's name surfaced in bold across the wall. The audit paused, then it resumed. Except now, it wasn't hosted by the board system. It ran through yours, and it pulled receipts. Shipment manifests labeled as educational materials, redirected to offshore labs. Treatment trials listed as wellness protocols, signed under pediatric pseudonyms. Your daughter listed as Durozunard 245. You watched their faces shift from confusion to fear. The woman who replaced your compliance role whispered into her headset, but there was no reply. Her team had already been locked out. Your silence had given you a decade of invisibility, but today it detonated like a cathedral imploding. They had laughed when you left, poured drinks on your NDA, said you were too sentimental to survive this industry, too human to lead it. But you recorded them that night. Hidden mic, jacket lapel, catching every syllable of their celebration. Gerald's toast. He was brilliant, but weak. Let's make sure he stays that way. They thought it stayed in your archives. But the footage aired on 4 global finance networks by noon. Tagged. From an untraceable handle. Failsafe key. No face, no source, no traceable origin. Just a storm of truth swallowing the empire.